Campaign for Liberty in Memphis, Tennessee is honored to bring to our city two ladies from Louisiana who are fighting to insert the voice of the people back into their state government. Both Angela Aleph and Karen Champagne are mothers and business owners who are concerned that ordinary citizens no longer have representation at their state capital. The high-powered special interest groups with money and power to buy influence have taken over their government. In an effort to get elected officials to listen, Angela and Karen have formed the People LLC and have been working together since 2009.
Hello, everyone. We're going to start our meeting this evening, and I want to thank you all. Many of you were here on Monday night, and I'm glad that you came back, and I think we'll probably get a lot more. Actually, we're probably going to have, as I said, this is the meat of the whole problem tonight. We're fortunate enough to have two marvelous gals here, extremely knowledgeable, unselfish patriots who are both moms, both have their own businesses, and have dedicated, excuse me?
Do introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. But let me finish this sentence, okay. Have dedicated their lives basically to our children, and I might say to the rest of the world's children, because we're looking at a global workforce training system which is really going to be limited learning for lifelong labor. By the way, I've just been informed that I better identify myself. I'm Charlotte Iserby. I am the author of The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America, and I was fortunate, in quotes enough, to be in the office where all of the restructuring came from in the United States Department of Education under Ronald Reagan. And what we're looking at, school choice, charter schools, communist core, technology, global education, US-Soviet education agreements, limited learning for lifelong labor, no more grades, no more books, etc. That came out of my office, which most people would be surprised to hear because it was supposed to be a conservative agenda coming out of the Reagan administration. I leaked a major technology grant, Project BEST, Better Education Skills Through Technology, and I knew I was going to get fired, so I got all the documents out of my office before I leaked the document. That document put computer courseware in every subject into every single state, and that was in 1981. So those who are fighting Common Core, I can understand their fight, their battle, but we've had Common Core under many labels ever since 1969 with the National Assessment for Education Progress. Our standards were, in fact, I think even worse in the 70s when I served as a local school board member. And we identified one standard in the health education that it's a disgusting subject, but I like to mention it to those who think the standards are bad now. This was a standard, and it was for 12th graders. It would be for first grade now. And the standard was that the students should understand the 3 types of sexual intercourse, including with animals. And so I asked those who are fighting the Common Core to understand that, yes, it's a battle worth fighting, but there's a much bigger one out there. And they are being diverted from the major one, which is tax-funded school choice under charter schools. And the reason I say that is that a charter school is a public school. The only difference, and there is no other difference, is that it does not have an elected school board. And we have to look at the situation this way. That's taxation without representation. And the education budget across the board in the United States is only second to defense in discretionary spending. So if we allow ourselves to give up our education system to unelected boards and have no say in what our students are taught or tested on, and you could be sure the Common Core, no matter whether you think you killed it or not, will come back, because any federally funded program, I've never known one that didn't come back. It will come back and face these parents who fought the Common Core so valiantly in their favorite charter school, and then they will have no place to go to complain because there will be no elected board. If we let this happen with that number 2 expenditure in education, after defense, number two, what is going to keep the American people from saying, huh, even I, why should I go and vote downtown in the middle of the winter in Maine, go vote for tax collector, when I don't even have the right to go and vote on the school budget? And so our system is going to unravel. And that is the goal of these internationalists. That's the only way they can bring the United States down, is through making us into, well, actually, we fought the revolution over this, didn't we? We're going to go right back to where we were before, and we're not going to have any say in how our money is spent. So all I can say is these gals, I met them just recently, and I'm so impressed with what they've done, because they've done the hard work. They were initially involved with the Tea Party. They can correct me on anything that I'm wrong on. I hope they will. But and they did a lot of work there, a lot of good Tea Party people. They realized that the Tea Party was infiltrated by the neoconservatives, good people. They managed, they're there about 5 years working on these things. They managed to go in because enough of the Tea Party people knew them, trusted them, deprogrammed them, and they brought them out, and they're now helping them. It's a faceless army in Louisiana that is actually fighting the battle for all of us. Now, along with that involvement with the Tea Party, they have taken it upon themselves to go to the legislature in Baton Rouge, and unbelievable, I don't know how they've done it. I think you could do it here, and they're going to help you all understand how you can do it. Draft legislation for the protection of pupil rights, of assessment, privacy rights, and they'll explain this to you. If you can believe it, they got bills passed, these two gals. So I'm going to leave it to them right now, and at the end, I do want to read something to you after they're finished, and I hope you'll remind me to do this. It's a model for the country really coming out of Georgia. It's called Georgia Visions, and most states have this. And it's a shocking document, their own words, and that will be sort of the dessert for you all tonight. You can go home knowing that their goal is not education at all. It's womb to tomb, limited learning for lifelong labor, spin-off profits using your children, unelected boards. This is a very scary scenario, and that's why I'm thrilled that these gals are here with us today. They know where it's at. They know you have to go to the legislature. You have to change the legislation, get bills passed. So let's give them a hand. Angela, okay. Here's Angela, my buddy. And I always feel awfully little when I stand next to Angela. And then this lovely, slender girl is really a hot pistol. Okay, go ahead. Good luck. And I don't think they need any good luck from me. They're so good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Charlotte. I'm Angela Aliff, and this is Karen Champagne, and together we're the People LLC. We were very fortunate to meet Charlotte. By the grace of God, really. A friend of ours just picked up the phone to order deliberate dumbing down copies, and Charlotte answered the phone, and the rest is history. Charlotte was good enough to come down and spend a couple of weeks with us in Baton Rouge while session was on, and she saw some very, very frightening bills related to community ed, which we'll maybe touch on later. But Karen and I, just to give you a little background on us, as Charlotte said, we are business owners. We have families. We don't get paid for this. We do this out of panic, really, for our families and for our state and our nation. And we live on different sides of Lake Pontchartrain. By the grace of God, we met, actually, because the Tea Parties, I was involved in the Greater New Orleans Tea Party. Karen had started 2 Tea Parties on the North Shore, and we both had been invited to a Tax Day Tea Party rally to speak and had never met. And I had my speech ready. I didn't really know anybody there. And it was really hard-hitting, very hard-hitting, on the unions that day, I think is who I was picking on. And as I heard each speaker get up and it was really sweet and nice and rah-rah. I'm like, I just can't do this speech. There's no way. And then Karen got up. And then I said, you know what? I'm okay. Because Karen really let him have it. And so the rest is history there. Karen was researching on the federal level. I had been researching on the state level, not just education. Both of us were researching every arena. And we realized in talking to each other that everything that we thought was being put in at the federal level, we discovered in our state was also being put in without anyone knowing it on the state level. And so we decided to put our heads together and go to Baton Rouge. And I'll let Karen take it from there to tell you about our initial foray into the Capitol and the legislature, to give you a taste of what happens to regular people when you start.
We decided that we were going to focus on state level, and because we can't really drive to Washington, and we couldn't really affect what was happening in Washington, so we were going to focus on Baton Rouge and legislation that was happening in Baton Rouge, and so that's basically what we did. And we decided that we would just go to the Capitol and start looking at bills that were being put in, and maybe we started doing research on a lot of it. I had actually read the health care bill, the Affordable Care Act, the entire thing, and it's quite frightening. But a lot of what they're doing in forming nonprofit organizations and enticing the states with grant money is exactly what's happening. And so in order to comply, our states are changing our laws in order to meet the requirements for federal money. So we thought that perhaps our legislators just didn't know this. And maybe we just needed to show up and let them know, and we would only be there maybe 1 or 2 days, and it would all stop, right? So we decided to find bills that we could talk to or speak to and just go into committee and sign a form and let them have it. And we did, and it occurred to us, not by accident, but mostly by them asking us who we were with, that they really didn't want to hear from the people. Because we're not with anybody, we were not a special interest group, we were just two citizens wanting our voices to be heard. So we got together and we decided that maybe we need to be somebody. So we'll form an LLC. So we did. We decided to name ourselves the People, so that when they ask us who we're with, we can just tell them we're with the people. Made sense to us. So when they say it now, it's just we're with the people. But now, of course, they call us just the Two People LLC to try and minimize us. But that's okay. It's not going to stop us. We still want our voices to be heard. And we represent the Constitution. And we're basically asking for them just to honor the Constitution, honor their oaths of office, and return our state back to where it should be, honoring the Constitution. So that's just a little of where we started.
Where we went from there, at that time we were with the Tea Parties, and we taught them really everything we learned as we learned it. And we had great support. And then, as Charlotte said earlier, the national organizations moved in.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, it occurred in the Tea Party that I was in first, or we noticed it first. We had our very first tax day rally, and it was just an impromptu rally. You know, everybody, I know there was, this national movement. I don't know if you all had that here, but we did. And there were websites where you could go and sign up and, you wanted to throw a tea party. And so it was really what we thought was a grassroots movement. and somebody maybe just had an idea to throw up a website, and we didn't realize that we were being organized, but we were. Because once we had these tax day rallies, a lot of the groups in our state decided that we would get together and continue. We would have meetings, you know, and the group that I was with, we decided we'll elect a board, we'll become an organization, we'll have meetings regularly, we'll discuss, you know, what we can do as a group. So we did. We elected our board, and I was elected treasurer, and the gentleman that actually started the movement in our area for the first Tea Party was the president, and we elected a vice president and a secretary, and it was very, you know, informal. And one day, we had our little monthly meeting, and out of the blue, we had two strangers show up, and basically raised their hand and demanded transparency and wanting to see the books. And we were like, what? Who, you know, we didn't even know who they were with. And before you knew it, there was a lot of screaming and yelling going on. And the gentleman who was president said, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for all of this. You know, if this is what this is going to be, forget it. And he walked out. And I followed. And he and I and a few of the other people that followed, we went and had a little meeting. And he said, you know, I just wanted to do what was right, what I felt in my heart to save the country, you know, from where I believe we're headed in the wrong direction. So he owned the meetup site, and he basically said, let them have the Tea Party if they want to. He changed the name from the Tea Party name that it was to another name, and put a letter up on the website, and everybody that wanted to stay could stay, and everybody that wanted to go could go. And that's what we did. While I was being treasurer, I had the checkbook, and I had to go return it to this new group that was now the Tea Party, because apparently they had made themselves president and treasurer. And so I contacted them and told them that they needed all of this since they took the name in the LLC. And when I went there, they were just, you know, it was a representative from the Republican Party, and a representative from another group that it just made it very obvious to me that, you know, there was definitely something wrong with what was going on here. And Angela can tell you more of what happened in her group.
Well, I can speak really to most of the Tea Parties in our state, because what happened was once Karen and I got together, we realized a trend, and they all got taken over in similar fashion. The organizations doing it are largely the Republican Party, Family Research Council, American Principles Project. Pretty much those are the main groups that are doing it.
And we were organized, though, that by Freedom Works, right?
Oh, and Freedom Works, we can't forget them. Freedom Works is the real ones that are doing the community organizing and taking over the grassroots. So we had lots of Tea Parties, strong Tea Parties, really good Tea Party members across the state. So that's what happened there. And so basically we just decided, they started blocking us out from being able to make presentations. They didn't want anybody to hear what we were saying. And so we just bounced off. And that's one suggestion, strong suggestion we have for anyone that decides to take this kind of thing on in your state. You got to be able to bounce off, because they block you everywhere you go. And wherever you're blocked, you have to learn not to take it personally and to bounce off and just keep going and keep talking in another direction. The Tea Parties and whoever was running them at that time.
The leaders.
Whoever came into leadership.
This,
right.
movement.
Those who took over. Largely, you know, a lot of the members still followed what we were saying. But there was no other organization, so people were kind of at a loss. So it's kind of, we hit a really bumpy time for people in the state, not knowing who to trust, not knowing where to turn, not knowing how to organize without being organized. It was just kind of messy and unproductive. So Karen and I just took that as an opportunity to get outside of our comfort zone, and we started sharing our message, which is freedom in the Constitution, with anybody that had at least one good ear. If we knew sign language, we would have gone with anybody with no good ear. So it didn't matter if it was one person, 6 people, 200 people, 400 people, it didn't matter. If people were willing to hear it, we just kept bouncing off and going. As a result, our bubble got way bigger. And that was a very good benefit to what had happened. And you have to bounce off and look to see how you can make lemonade out of lemons. And that's what we just learned to do. And it gets your skin really tough. And then you need that when you go to the Capitol, trust me. We wound up being able to interact with Occupy movement, with the black community, with Catholics, with Protestants, everything that makes up America. And it was very interesting. I'll let Karen share with you about the Occupy movement, but we got bashed really hard by the Tea Party groups, publicly and behind closed doors, because the Occupy movement asked Karen and me to show up and have a debate, basically, with a group from Common Cause and another group. And so we accepted it. We accept any opportunity to share with people about the Constitution and what that means. And the Occupy movement in our state has a lot of young people and college kids who probably have never heard this in their lifetime. So there was no way we were passing it up. We didn't care what anyone had to say. But it was a great, great experience.
Yeah, we were given the assignment, and this is important to realize, that's why we wanted to share it. We were given the assignment, everyone was going to do an opening speech at this debate, and we were supposed to do, our speech on our democracy. And so our entire speech was basically an apology, because we couldn't really speak to a democracy because the United States is not a democracy. We're a constitutional republic. And so we went into what that means and what it means and what freedom means and how our Constitution protects everyone. And when I tell you these college kids didn't know that they were free, they didn't. And it's really quite sad. Because when question time came, they only wanted to talk to Angela and I. And they wanted to explain more to them about this freedom we were telling them about that they had, that they didn't know they had. They wanted us to explain more to them about the Constitution. And I get very upset by this because I have kids, and I made sure my kids know about it, But these kids that are being drawn into these movements, they don't know. And so it's really important, I believe, for us to reach out to the younger generation and to let them know they're free. Because if we don't do it, no one else will. They are not learning it in school because they don't want them to know. It's just really important.
So needless to say, we've not been invited back to Occupy. So we bounced again. And we just started really realizing when the anti-Common Core movement showed up. By then we had studied Charlotte's work. And I know everybody, knows about the deliberate dumbing down of America. Many people know about the videos. I don't know if you know all the resources on her website.
They are fabulous.
And it's all you need to know. The only reason we were able to see our way through all of this is because we had I read it in one day. I couldn't put it down. Charlotte's book. And we read her articles after that, everything we could find. And so what that does for you is it gives
And
you
can I add one more thing? And when we didn't believe what we were reading, because a lot of it is really hard to believe, we went to the documentation on her website, and it is all there. Just wanted to.
It's all documented. So we were able to create a prism through Charlotte's work through which we view everything in government now. Because it is all connected, it's all tied to the same agenda, the workforce agenda. And all the information you need to be able to form your own prism is in Charlotte's work. So we say that everywhere we go because we can't stress it enough. It's one thing to have the book, you have to read it. You have to watch those videos if you're not able to read the whole book. But it's very important to get that background because guess what? These national special interest groups that are posing as conservatives, they're not telling you the story. They're not telling you the truth. They're not telling you what you need to affect what we were able to affect so far in Louisiana. And without her work, we couldn't have done it. We would have been hamsters on a wheel chasing after things that aren't real fights. So we're to the anti-Common Core movement, and what we noticed was the same groups showed up. It was the same national groups who took over the Tea Parties. We're now creating this anti-Common Core movement, so of course our antenna went up. What had happened was when in 2012, our Governor Jindal put through the education reform package. The Tea Parties at that time were listening to us, and they were solidly against the education reform package because of school choice. So they were well informed at that point. They were so well informed that they asked us to go to Baton Rouge for them, and we listed a pretty good arm's length worth of Tea Parties who asked us to go there and make sure the legislature knew that they were against the education reform package. Well, unfortunately, FreedomWorks had gotten there 3 months before session and went in and told, because they have all of our email addresses, right? Because look, we fell for them at one time too. They're able to use those email address lists that they have and all the membership groups that they get people to sign up for and Community Connect, FreedomWorks Connect and all this stuff. They get all those email addresses and they're able to go into our legislatures behind closed doors and say, what they did then was they said the Tea Parties, we're here because the Tea Parties want this package to pass. We didn't find that out until a few days out of session beginning when I called my legislator and his assistant told me, "What are you talking about, Angela? You must be crazy. FreedomWorks has been here for 3 months. They represent the Tea Parties. They said the Tea Parties want it, so you're wrong." Well, you have to remember, we're Two People LLC. Against a national special interest group such as FreedomWorks, we didn't have any clout. It didn't matter that we were the ones paying the taxes there. It didn't even matter that the Tea Parties wrote letters that we could show asking us to speak for them. None of it mattered. That train had left the station before the session started, and it was not turning back. So when we noticed that FreedomWorks was leading the anti-Common Core movement, we became suspicious naturally. And we became suspicious immediately of any other national special interest group that had anything to do with them. And they didn't disappoint us. So we have it posted. You know, we'll give you all our information, but it's on our Facebook page and in the photos.
YouTube now?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
a second.
Oh, okay.
You want to tell about that?
Yeah.
So what we have is on, and you can see it now actually, unless they pulled it down. It was up there as recently as last week. American Principles Project, who's leading the movement also. If you go on their website, you'll find their article where they actually posted the Politico article where their chairman explained that they created the anti-Common Core movement so that they could community organize concerned parents into a voting bloc that they could then use to further the school choice agenda. Now that's their words on their website. That's not us saying that. Well, because of our experience with FreedomWorks passing the education reform package, we knew exactly what they meant, that they were going to do. And that's what they're trying to do. That's why it's so important that Charlotte's willing to give her time and go around and tell people, explain to people all over the country that this is a faux fight that they have us fighting. Are the standards good? No, they're horrible. They're the same horrible standards we've had forever. So if these national geniuses are concerned about the standards, where have they been for decades? Karen and I actually were screaming about them long before Common Core ever got a name. Long before. So we're trying to figure out, wait, where were you? So what they did was they worked hard, and they still work hard at silencing us within our state through the anti-Common Core movement leaders, because what they did was set up the school choice network within each state, and I'm sure y'all have it here. So you'll have the anti-Common Core groups that are in each county. Now that doesn't mean the people heading those groups are part of this agenda, because those people are just well-meaning people who are scared for their children and just want to fix something. And they want somebody to show them what to fix. And of course, most people think of these organizations as conservative and as on our side, because they'll say some good things that we want to hear while they're doing all this other stuff. And people don't know that. We understand that. So it's not maligning those people or those organizations within your counties. It's just a warning that really people within your state who understand this need to help educate them. That's what we set out to do. And it's not an easy task. People don't take to that very easily. That's one of the reasons we got shut out initially, until finally people started realizing that what we were saying makes sense and what they're saying just doesn't. And we got proof of that during session. They got proof of it, I should say, because we had the typical anti-Common Core bills were proposed. We were able to help to kill them, because what they did was make the situation much worse, so that we wouldn't ever be able to get rid of Common Core or the testing or any of the rest of it. And so because enough people in the state are not in these groups and not in the Tea Parties, enough people were listening and understanding, and then some people within those groups did too, that we effectively, killed the bills. And then the 3 bills that we worked on got passed that actually do address these issues. But we want you to see, we felt really bad because some of our friends are in these groups, and they came to the Capitol this particular day. And they were so tense and excited and everything, because they were going to speak in favor of this bill that had been promoted for months as going to be the bill to get rid of Common Core. And we knew it wasn't, but they were confused. And their faces hit the floor when our representative and the School Board Association person is the first one you'll hear. Representative of the School Boards Association spoke first, and then the representative who authored the bill came up behind him. And when they heard these words come out of their mouths, their faces hit the floor, and they were devastated. They now know the truth, so it was a blessing, even though it hurt, and now they're helping to really fight the issue. But we want you to see, this is the leading representative in fighting Common Core in Louisiana, and this is his bill that he said last session, told everybody before session started was going to get rid of Common Core.
We see this instrument as a vehicle of compromise. I seldom go into the negative, but I think it's important to comment from a negative perspective along the lines of the fact that this is not an abandonment of Common Core state standards or higher standards. Not be lost. It actually strengthens the move to Common Core state standards, and it's an opportunity to bring people together. This is, again, not an abandonment of Common Core state standards. We want,
And to me, if Representative Guyman's bill provides just the smallest venue to get them comfortable without altering anything here, nothing changes.
So please, Mr. White, do not come up here and attack my character and say that you don't trust the author, that I think he might get rid of Common Core. Not with this bill. You give me an opportunity, I will, but not with this bill.
The record.
I'm Angela Aleph. I'm representing the People LLC, and we do not support the Common Core, but we cannot support this bill because we don't believe this bill is really about the standards or the testing so much as it is about removing our voice in government and our representative government that we're guaranteed under our state constitution. This, from our reading of the bill, it appears that Bessie will answer to this unelected commission and actually work for this commission, and that the commission pretty much answers to no one as it rests within the Department of Ed. Bessie, although the People LLC feels is not responsive to the citizens that elect them and is instead responsive to the money with coming from corporations, it still is the only voice we have, and it's up to us to do something to change the bodies on that body. And so to remove its influence and to make it simply the lapdog of a unelected commission is something that we really don't want to see happen. We don't see this as a solution. We would like a solution, but this is not it. This is removing our representative form of government even further. And so that's why we oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative.
As we read through the model legislation that was sent through to many of the states, and now that we've seen what has occurred in many of the states, it was just a rebranding bill. They all still have Common Core. I believe Oklahoma was the last one to quote-unquote repeal Common Core, and now that they've come out with their commission has come out with their new standards, they are a rebranding of Common Core. And that's exactly what the people who they've had to admit, the Stop Common Core leaders had to admit that, yes, it's a rebranding, and throw our hands up because there's just absolutely nothing we can do. Common Core's here, it's, it's federal intrusion, and of course it's federal intrusion. But ESEA is where the federal intrusion started. The states don't have to accept the funding. And what's really interesting, we talk about this all the time, is that the funding is allocated to the purpose of the grant. So it's not like we're even getting any free money. We're getting money, I guess, if we want to grow our state governments to have more employees to handle these programs. But usually...
Can you explain that portion of it? What you just said about funding.
The funding, well, the ESEA is a grant program, basically.
Based on
Elementary, secondary education.
Right.
That's 1965, the first one, the first act passed, the changed education to performance-based also.
Right. The ESEA grant is what I was talking about. And it's been reauthorized under many different names since then. The Goals 2000, the America to Work Act, No Child Left Behind, Race to the Top. Those are all just grant programs to entice the states. The agenda has been already established and it's been being put through the states. And so there really is no intention from any special interest group to stop the program. They're just basically grabbing for the money. So the real thing, and one of the lobbyists for the Stop Common Core movement even said it. It's not about the standards. It's about who controls the standards. So they're fighting over the money. And what does that mean for our children? Absolutely nothing, because they're still subject to the standards. And we knew that. And we were watching what was happening in other states. And our legislators told us that there was no movement within the legislature. There was no interest in eliminating Common Core. that Common Core was in our state, it was here to stay. And so, you know, what we could do was maybe address some of the concerns that parents had. And so we were fortunate enough to have the ear of a legislator. And what we did was address those concerns. We have 3 bills that we put forward that we did get passed because we could get the parents behind us, because these were real bills and these were real concerns. We looked at all the model legislation that was being suggested and recommended for data privacy, and those were not data privacy bills. Whenever you're reading a piece of legislation and it says you can't do this except when this maybe happens, then you can do it. It's not really preventing anything. It's just letting you know when they're going to do it and how they're going to do it. So we were not happy with those, and we decided that, you know, if we would get the chance, we were going to write it the way we saw that it needed to be written, and that's exactly what we did. And we were really fortunate enough to have a legislator that really wanted to protect the privacy of the children.
He asked us to do 3 things: to make sure the bills were correct, so that he never got caught with his pants down in committee. He did not want it to have anything to do with Common Core, because that would be a death blow to the bills, because that's the political climate we're in. And he wanted them to actually affect the change that the parents in our state were after. If we couldn't get rid of what the parents perceived to be the big monster, we at least should make sure to address the actual things happening at the local district that were affecting their children. And that's what we set out to do. And the bills did pass unanimously, and the governor signed it. So it shows you we're not geniuses. We don't do this for a living. I look like this for a reason. It's just a matter of, if you know the truth, Charlotte's information, you understand what the agenda actually is, and you're willing to listen to whatever anyone tells you through that prism and decide for yourself whether what they're saying is true or not. You can see your way in your own state to write legislation, or to have someone write legislation that will actually fix some of this. This next shot is a video that we made, actually Karen's brother made for us, of Karen and Rep. Schroeder presenting our data privacy bill.
Yeah, we do a lot of our own makeshift YouTubes just to get information out there, but my brother was kind enough to help us with this one, and we spread this around to kind of help try and get support for the data privacy bill.
It'll just show you an example of some things you could maybe do.
Would you mind if I gained access to your private, personal information and put it in a database and sent to different entities across the country, if I promised that I wouldn't misuse it? Of course you would, and I would too. We go to great pains to ensure our personal information is protected, except apparently for our children, that is, the ones that are most vulnerable. Currently, we have no law protecting student data. Schools are a rich source of personal information about children that can be legally and illegally accessed by third parties. With incidents of identity theft, database hacking, and the sale of personal information rampant, there's an urgent need to protect students' privacy. But given the recent release of students' private information by our Department of Education to outside vendors, it is clear that we must do something to keep that from ever happening again. In an article published April 19th in 2013 in the Monroe News Star, In Bloom confirmed that students' Social Security numbers had been released through student enrollment in the course choice platform. In Bloom is an independent nonprofit organization, and they're basically a data warehouse. Until that release of information occurred, I personally had no idea that schools were using students' social security numbers in this technology age when identity theft is a real threat. To me, that's just unacceptable.
When the citizens come and sit at the table to negotiate, the only thing that we have to negotiate with is our rights. And so when the department asks us to give in just a little bit, they're really asking us to give up our rights, and in this case also our children's rights. And we have a right to privacy, and so do our children. It has come to our attention that certain school districts are using information to sell mailing lists to commercial businesses. This is the kind of things that we want to have our children protected from. The ACT and the SAT are both being sued right now for also disclosing personal information. So I think this is really something that I'm glad that you all are willing to at least look at, and please consider supporting this. Thank you.
You know, I think they sort of got a taste today just how big government really is, and it's gotten bigger than almost than what we can control.
What he was referring to there was while the bill was in committee and being debated, of course it came under fire. In that bill, we shut the data down to the district level, lock and key thrown away. Mm-hmm. And we knew it wasn't going to go through in that form, but that was a real good jumping off spot. And so it was kind of stalling. The department was fighting it tooth and nail. And so the committee chair said that we really needed to go into conference outside of the committee, which I personally don't like. I think it should be done out in the open.
Well, it was amazing to us the amount of stakeholders that have an interest in access to our children's information. They were coming out of the woodwork to testify as why they needed our kids' private information. And that's what he was referring to. It's just our government has grown so big we can't even control it. And we really can't. And they're doing this through our schools. They're trying to create a seamless system. I don't know if y'all have heard that term used in referring to the schools, but that's where they're not only educating, but they're providing services. Well, in Louisiana, they're not waiting for us to decide we need the services. They want to find who needs the services and offer it to them. Or, better yet, just give it to them and not even let them know they're getting it. And when you think about conservative ideology and how, we're really not happy about paying welfare and having all these programs, why would we want a seamless system? Why would we want to make it easy for people to have all these programs and not even have to fill out an application or, go through any kind of trouble to know that, and for a child to not even know he's on government assistance. He's going to go through school being fed by government, being taken care of, health care, everything provided by government. What's going to happen when he gets out? It's all being provided for him through school. He's part of a system where he's being provided for by government, and he doesn't even know it. And maybe his parents don't even know it, And they're constantly telling us how they're coming to the table and telling us how we need to identify these kids. And what about the kids whose parents just don't care? Well, we have a system set up for that, and that's really important to be aware of when negotiating for your rights, is that they're going to use whatever they can to tug at your heartstrings. We have a system set up, and we're continually saying it over and over again. If there's neglect and abuse, we have a system for that. These children will be provided with a guardian who will be able to sign for that child. And so it's really important to know the system, to know the law, to know what's already there, what can be provided when you're going up against big government, because you have to be able to stand up to them trying to guilt you, shame you into giving up your rights. They want to access all of your information. They're rifling through all of our personal information to find who qualifies. I mean, think about it. They don't have a right, they don't have the authority, yet they're doing it over and over and over again. And they want you to feel bad if you want to stop them, because we have to provide for those that can't provide for themselves. Well, we are providing, but at least we want them to know they're on the program so that they'll want to get off of it. Because all we're doing is growing the programs. And all our government agencies and administrations are doing is ensuring job security. And we've actually heard them say this in meetings where they advise each other on how to do this, that they're basically ensuring job security by making sure these programs never go away.
Also, people in the United States of America are supposed to have the option of whether or not to participate in a program of any kind. And that applies across the board, whether you're affluent, whether you're poor, whether you're educated, whether you're not educated. You have the same rights in the United States of America as any other person. And we drive that point home as often as possible because, as Karen said, when we go to the table, all we have to negotiate with are our rights. And as far as we're concerned, that's not up for negotiation. Mm-hmm. So what we have to do, and what we encourage you to do, is really thoroughly become familiar with your state's constitution. Because what's happening on the federal level, we can't control, but in the United States, you're supposed to be able to control what happens within your state. So for instance, in regards to data privacy, FERPA, that's all we hear in the anti-Common Core legions is FERPA. FERPA got, annihilated. Well, we realized that. So we say, guess what? Oh, I'm sorry, FERPA. That's the federal regulation. If a state accepts certain grant monies, they have to agree to provide certain minimum level of protection, and that minimum level got destroyed, pretty much.
The Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Yes, Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, sorry.
So we knew that had gotten destroyed pretty much. But the thing is, the federal level doesn't prevent the state level from having even tougher restrictions.
Well, all FERPA says basically is that in order to qualify for grant money, you have to have state law at least as strong as FERPA. That's it. That's what it says. It's not the law. That means your states can adopt stronger laws than FERPA, as long as they are at least as strong as FERPA, which right now isn't strong at all. So that's the starting point. That's one thing too in this Stop Common Core movement. They keep throwing out there FERPA, because they don't want you to know that your state can write its own privacy law, and it can.
And to show you how much the anti-Common Core leadership at the national level and the leadership within the state is being led to also squelch this information. This data privacy law that Rep. Schroeder got passed has been recognized even by the U.S. Department of Education at this time as the toughest student data privacy legislation in the country.
Okay, let's give my hand.
But if you only hang out with anti-Common Core groups, you would never know it exists. the leadership across the nation in the anti-Common Core network, they're having big discussions right now that we've become aware of regarding data privacy and what legislation can be written. Every piece of legislation, I think, in the country that has been proposed, including the model legislation out of ALEC, has been discussed ad nauseum between these leaders. Not once has Rep. Schroeder's law been mentioned. Not even mentioned. That is a travesty. And it's not because we had anything to do with it, it's just because so many people in the country are following these leaders. And they're never going to know that their children's data can be protected, and they are fearful and disheartened and upset because all they know is FERPA. And FERPA doesn't have to affect your child because your state can protect against that. And the legislators don't know this because they're listening to these lobbyists who are leading these groups. So it's very important that you reach legislators and educate them, even when they seem like they don't want to hear it. Believe me, Rep. Schroeder never wanted to hear anything we ever wanted to say. And after a while, he just started, because he is a good man, an honest man, there just started being something about it that made him want to look a little closer. And you just have to persist until somebody does. This next video we wanted to show you is another representative in our state. And this shows you why they want our children's data. They have ours too.
Yeah, this is showing that it's not just our children's data that they're after. This is another one that my brother was kind enough to make for us.
This went viral all over the nation, so I don't know if you've seen it, but we wanted to share it.
Well, originally what we were facing was a problem with fraud, specifically in workers' compensation and unemployment insurance. Well, initially, in order to respond to workers' compensation unemployment fraud, we were looking at the SAS fraud framework to provide those analytics. But when we built our system, we decided, instead of providing an agency-specific solution, that we would instead create a centralized data warehouse applying the SAS fraud framework there and allow every agency within state government to operate like a hub and spoke type system where they would all send in their data. By the centralized data warehouse getting data from those multiple sources, it would allow each participating agency who was seeking to detect fraud within their agency to create that comprehensive person profile and look for anomalies. The beauty to me behind the solution that SAS provided was that they were able to take a state that was data rich and solution poor and compile, aggregate all of that data into a single location so that we could then have multiple applications that were available. Ultimately, my hope would be that we reach a point in state government to where we can take all of the information we have, create that comprehensive person profile so it makes the lives of our citizens better. If they walk into the Department of Motor Vehicles to renew their driver's license, the individual, the state worker, can bring up the screen that automatically populates with your information to complete that application. But not only does it do that, but may also alert that individual that their child may be eligible for the state health insurance program that may enable that child to get treatment at an early age for something that could turn into a very costly disease later that will cost the state lots of dollars. If we could be proactive from that aspect, use the analytics to identify where there is a risk to the state down the road based upon the information we know on the individual. whether it's saving money in healthcare costs or quickly identifying an individual who is going to be at risk for incarceration down the road. If we could intervene in that person's life, 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 if we could intervene in that person's life.
Kind of makes you feel all warm and fuzzy, huh? Just waiting to intervene in your life. That's one of our elected officials in the state of Louisiana. That's what his ideas are for us and our information. They just want to follow us around, go into the DMV and let you know, what kind of services you need from the government today.
Can I ask a question? What program is that under?
That's the SAS program. They actually installed it under the Workforce Commission. We have workman's comp. It was intended to help identify workman's comp fraud. It is now accessible by all our agencies so that we can identify fraud throughout all of our agencies.
Before it happens.
Before it happens. Right.
So it is in place.
Exactly. Yes, we have the RFP for it, and they claim they're not using it right now. We're still trying to find proof on that. But we do have the RFP, and it was purchased. The system was purchased.
Is that what committees or what sections? Is that labor?
It comes under, for us, the Workforce Commission, which is ultimately also now partnering with our Department of Education.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Are they sharing that information with the federal fusion centers? Do we know?
We're not sure.
But they could.
Right, they could.
Oh, yeah. Well, it links all departments, so all departments share.
And I'm sure that, well,
So that would include Homeland Security for sure.
Okay.
I wanted to ask the little teeny piece where you said, in reference to workman's comp fraud, explain that little piece to me, how that works.
The way it works is they create this comprehensive person profile by gathering, say, all of my data from all the different agencies. And they...
Well, yeah, but she was talking about the workman's comp, like how it was intended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they use that to determine what your risk for putting in a fraudulent claim would be.
Right, but
And
when a business fills out an application for a workman's comp policy, they have to list all of their employees. So they would have all of the employees' information. That was the original intent, to have all of the employees go into the database so that they could track the employees and their losses. But then they decided instead of just using it for that, they would use it to input all of the information on every citizen throughout every agency, and not just the employees.
Okay, who's getting the money from the fraud piece? When they're frauding, is anybody making money from that piece, of the fraud piece?
I'm not following what you're asking.
Yeah.
You talking about anybody other than the employee?
No, the employees. Is the employer the one that's doing the fraud piece against the employee?
No. Are you saying they're false claims by employees?
False claims, yes, I'm sorry.
employees making false claims.
Right.
Okay, and the reason I ask that, I think that's what's happening when we were traveling across the city in Memphis, and we see so many other nationalities that's wanting to work. And when you pass through the neighborhood, they got all these people getting on these trucks and things like that. I don't think they're being treated fair.
You saying, are they undocumented, or they're just showing up to a corner and they say?
They're showing up to a corner, but they're not being paid the right fee, they're paying it.
Well, yeah, they're being paid under the table, so they won't be in the system.
Yeah. So,
Right.
So that doesn't apply, really.
Yeah.
So another bill that got passed unanimously and is now law had to do with giving parents, returning parental authority, or we'd like to say the legislature recognized the parent's authority to have full access to anything that their child comes in contact with in the school day. And one piece of that, one very important piece of that got taken out, because if we didn't, if we held tight to that, then the whole bill would have died. And that is the high stakes test on which the accountability for the teachers and the schools and the students and the school districts rest. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but this is video from that committee.
The rationale on that, beyond the question of just needing to ensure that we have total integrity in the test, is that if you give out the test, you essentially can never use that test again, which literally triples the cost that the state bears every year in developing then a new test for the next year. So you have a cheating and security question. You also have a cost question, a significant cost question. You could never use those questions again ever, where they supported this. I have gone back, I have talked with our assessment people, and we actually agree with the original objectives, and we think that we should release at least one test form per year for statewide standardized tests. Now, that does not mean that we will be able to release every form. I do want to be clear, because some kids will, they take different forms, but we do. I just think we're playing with fire here. Giving out the question in advance to anyone who might take it risks the integrity of what really is, from a policy perspective, the backbone of the education system.
How about it?
Those are important words there, right? The backbone of our education system. And it really is. We can't see the test. Are you all allowed to see the test here in Tennessee? No, none of them? No, none of the tests. They grade your children on it. They grade your teachers on it. They grade your districts on it. They're failing your children. They're failing your teachers. They're failing your districts. They're taking over your schools, and we still can't see the test. Anybody think that's odd? Because I don't know, I do.
What are you going to do when it's all on the computer? I mean, with the test. I think of the quote from Dustin Houston, the head of the World Institute for Computer Assisted Teaching. And this is 20 years ago, he said. Won't it be wonderful when the child in the most remote area of the world can have the benefit of the world's greatest psychologists on that computer, and nobody, not even the teacher, can get between that computer and your child. That is the most devastating comment. So the teacher can't even.
Well, that's, go ahead. I'm
What
sorry.
are we going to do?
Answer the question.
Okay. Well, with the legislation that we wrote, we were able to keep in that parents can see any non-secure test or assessment. So any test that's not used to fail the schools and the students and the teachers, any other thing, parents can have access to, whether or not it's on the computer. A very key point is that parents can see, and this is spelled out in the law, parents can see any survey given to their child in any form prior to their child taking that survey. And that would include the assessments, because every assessment includes a survey portion, every assessment, whether it's your state-created assessment, or the NAEP, or the PISA, or the TIMS, or the ACT, or the SAT, they all have a survey portion. And in Louisiana now, our parents have the right to see that survey portion before the children take the assessment. Unless, if it's unsecured, they have a right to see the entire assessment after their kids take it.
So this is the legislation you girls were responsible for getting back.
Yeah, this is the current law
We
now.
tried to include having the secured tests visible as well, and they were going to kill the bill. And
So, this lady.
What I'm, see if I can get this right. The legislator was saying that we can't give out the tests because we can never use them again.
That's what he was saying. Yeah, he was trying to justify why we can't see the test. In Louisiana, it's the LEAP or the iLEAP now, the PARC test. I don't know which one you all have signed up for. The NAEP, the whatever, whatever the test is. The secure test, they're standardized tests, the tests they're using to grade every child and district and teacher. We can't see it.
He was making the case that, and that's our superintendent of education, by the way.
Because once we had it written in a bill, they had to justify why it is they needed it taken out. And they can't justify it. Why can't we let the parents see the test? My child takes a test. You're telling me my child has gone through a school year. He's gotten A's all year. He takes this test, and you're telling me he has to be held back. Okay, let's see how he performed. Let's see what he did. Let's see where he went wrong. No, we can't show you. You just have to trust us. Wait a minute. He got A's all year. You're telling me he has to be held back. We have teachers who their performance is being based on a test that they can't see. How many of you here would like that? If your employer said, guess what, at the end of the year, I'll let you come back next year if you pass a test. And you say, what's on the test? I'm not going to tell you. Well, how do I know if I'll pass the test? You won't. I'll just let you know. Hey, guess what? You failed the test. Yeah, you're fired. Don't come back.
And as a parent, we don't really care if our child passes, scores mastery, or fails. We want to see what our child did on the test, what they did well, what they didn't do well, and if it's testing math and language. Those two things haven't changed. Although they're trying, they haven't changed. So if they're really testing 3 plus 3, and that's the point we made to our superintendent, if they're really testing 3 plus 3 and nouns, verbs, and adjectives,
and see, Jane,
how many different ways can you ask those questions? So they've got to be asking the kids something else. Now, the only test that got out, and Charlotte speaks of this too, is an NAEP back in the 90s. And this was, ahead of No Child Left Behind, but teachers were actually teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic at that time. And it got out by accident, and what we know from that national assessment is that it was only testing on the entire assessment, 18% of it was testing what the teachers were teaching. 18%. And that happens to be the NAEP, which is where we get our national standards from.
And then, if our national standards are based anything on the PISA, which we want to say, well, we have a national test so that we can compare nationally. Then we have an international test, which is the PISA, so we can compare internationally, right? The PISA, if you look at the test characteristics, it says it's testing attitudes, values, and beliefs. It says it. It says exactly what it's testing. They're not hiding it. They're proud of it. They're testing attitudes, values, and belief, and it's all based on the agenda for the 21st century.
So it's all psychological.
They want to make sure your child's attitude, values, and beliefs match with the international agenda. Now, If we're going to exist as a new world order, let's think about this. We have socialist countries, we have communist countries, we have dictatorships, and then we have this darn kink in the works, this free country where these people are in charge of their own destiny. How are we going to make this new world order work? Are we going to teach the communists, the socialists, the dictators to be free? Or are we going to oppress the free people so that we're all the same and we can live cohesively in the New World Order? Now, I didn't come up with the term the New World Order. Bush did. He's the first person I heard of it from. Now, maybe someone else came up with it, but that's the first time I was introduced to that term, and I remember being quite young, hearing it on television, and it scared me then. It scares me even more now. So what they're doing is they're testing attitudes, values, and belief. Why do you think Finland and China do so well on the PISA? And it's frightening to me that we're not dead last, because that's where we should be.
And so when they speak of the achievement gaps, that's what they're speaking of. How, we explained it sometimes this way. If you're in a race against a little child, you're going to either hold back and make them think that they're kind of in the race, or just pull back altogether and let them win. And that's kind of what the world is doing with this achievement gap situation. The United States is being tested internationally, ranked internationally, based on how far are we allowing these other nations to catch up. Mm-hmm. Now, they can't catch up by increasing expectations and increasing standards levels, can they? They can't even really define what that is. The only way you can do this and get rid of this gap is by bringing us down. If you keep raising expectations, that gap never goes away. Mm-hmm. So the other thing to be frightened of is, as they tell us the achievement gap is closing. That's frightening. So that's why we try to get the high stakes test to be able to be seen, because we need to see it. And so that's really what we're telling people in the anti-Common Core movement. The real mantra that needs to be being said, show me my kid's test. And it needs to be said with arrogance, because how dare they?
Are you including the survey as part of the test you want to see? Because to me, the biggest intrusion on their privacy is the survey.
Well, we are allowed to see it.
Right. Because here, I know I've talked to your parents, and that was the big thing, because these kids were taking this, and one mother heard about it and said, you did not ask my permission to gather this information about me and my family, because it was all about where do you go to church, how often you go to church, what do you do, you know, everything else. What does your father do, what does your mother do, everything for work. Do you do this, do you eat dinner, you know, like whatever it is. Gathering information about the family dynamic and private information within the home. So I think the survey is as intrusive as the testing is stupid. So
well, and that's why we put that in. That is.
Yeah. Well, it
Yes.
speaks to the grading of the test too, because they're not really grading academics. They're grading, it goes into more of a social grade, because they're grading communities with the test. And the redistributive factor, how well are you redistributing the wealth? They want to make sure that everyone's the same. Because remember, it's a standardized test. And I tell people this all the time. When a child thinks of a question, he has to put it into context. And he has to draw on knowledge and experience in order to put it into context. So not just is he drawing on his knowledge and experience from the school, but he's drawing on it from the home as well. So when you have a country where every single family only has one child, and they're all pretty much experiencing the same thing because they're limited in what they can do, and they're limited in their freedom, when they take a test and they read a question, they're kind of drawing and coming to the same conclusions because their experience is the same. But when you take a child from the United States, where we have all different backgrounds and we have all different exposures, and our children draw on their experience and knowledge, they're not going to come to the same conclusions. And we shouldn't want them to. Because when they do, that's pretty much, it's like the last nail in the coffin. When we've reached that 100%, they're all thinking alike.
Angela, could I say something? This is in defense of teachers, sorry, because they've been so bashed. I just want to make one point. The teacher bashing has been unbelievable. I used to be the one person, when I wrote my book, I was feeling upset about teachers as well, but I feel sorry for them now than I feel about myself or the children. I've learned an awful lot. That the teachers, without them, we would have been down the tubes a long, long, long time ago, and I'm sick and tired of this teacher bashing coming out of the conservative movement. They bash teachers, they bash the union, they never bash the U.S. Department of Ed. Have you ever heard that? Mm-hmm. Because it was meant to be gotten rid of, and Reagan didn't do it. But what I want to point out on the NAEP, you were talking about how we found out. Now this is in the 80s. This isn't Common Core. We were looking at this stuff back then, paying $1,000 a month, phone bills fighting the national assessment, each individually $1,000 a month. This is for Common Core people I'm talking. Well, finally, you know who came to our assistance? The teachers out in Minnesota. They found the test. They got the NAEP, they got the questions. They went crazy in Philadelphia or wherever, you know. They sent people out within 24 hours to Minnesota to see what those teachers had found. Good for those teachers. That's how we found out that on the national assessment, which is what every state has had under a different title, you know, it's not all children taking it. It's a sampling in each state. They've been doing this since 1969. We found out that 60%, and that's minimum, of the questions on that test were attitudes, values, and beliefs. Now that came from public school teachers that decided to blow the whistle. Okay, you know, everybody out there beat up on teachers. Let's get rid of teacher tenure. You know, they don't mind performance-based teaching. They've got to start changing their mindset. And we've got to defend these teachers. They're plenty good.
In Louisiana, our state test, and if you read the law, I suggest you look up the law in your state, our state test is based on the NAEP, the NAEP. So we have had national standards since we've had a test because it's all based on the NAEP. So how can you have different standards? And so that's one of the reasons why teachers are so reluctant to come into the fight, because they've seen this. They know nothing's changed.
And they complained about it, 20 years ago they were complaining about it. Because I have lots of friends who are teachers. And they complained about it then. They were the original data collecting computers. They used to have boxes by their desks, filling out the forms on the kids. If you could think back and remember, I'm sure you probably can remember teachers complaining at all of a sudden at a certain point, I wish I could just teach. There's so much paperwork. Mm-hmm. It was the data collection, was the paperwork. So the teachers, they're getting bashed by a lot of people in our state. The only reason really that the education reform package passed was because the teachers were vilified publicly. It was horrible. It was horrible. And, they knew that they were being set up all along. They weren't real sure how exactly. So when Karen and I are able to explain to them about the testing, they finally understand and they realize how bad it actually has been, that they've been out there just trying to teach children, and they've been used and abused as well. Also with these standards, the Common Core, anti-Common Core people, especially Sandra Stotsky, likes to complain a lot that, the standards are not internationally benchmarked. The Common Core standards are not internationally benchmarked. Well, we're here to tell you they are. And why would you want them to be? The international benchmarks come from UNESCO. They're based on sustainable development. Why would we want anything to do with that touching our children?
Based on that, I just want to add, that's one thing that we like to stress, and we can't stress it enough. Before you follow a group, or before you tell your legislator anything that a specialist or a special interest group tells you, go tell your legislator we want standards that are internationally benchmarked. You're now asking for international benchmarks. You're telling them Common Core is not internationally benchmarked. We need international benchmarks. They've got these people now asking for something that they don't want. And so research, and before you speak to your legislator, and make sure you know what you're telling them.
May I just say this? I just said last night that UNESCO in 1972, that's where this all comes from. 100% what we're talking about tonight. Angela just mentioned it. In 1972, out of 20 of their education advisors, that's the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, 19 out of 20 were from communist countries. And that is what we're talking about. We are talking about a complete takeover of our education system by the communist regime. That's it. And you don't want to believe me? Don't believe me. But I'm telling you the truth. That's what we're putting in. I mean, how can you yourself out there, thinking people, tell me that that doesn't mean something? 19 out of 20 of them.
Help us understand the dynamic, why the U.S. would adopt a communist agenda. Just help us.
Well, because the Carnegie Corporation in 1934, and they're key. 1934, it's a direct quote. It's at AmericanDeception.com. Just this is the smoking gun for all the whole kind of conversation. In the little book called Conclusions and Recommendations for the Social Studies, which is what we're talking about, right? Which Carnegie published. There were a lot of communist educators at that time who were involved in that little book. It says, I don't know what page number, but you better read it. It's a small book, so read the whole thing. It says,
what's the title again?
What's that?
Conclusions.
Recommendations for the social studies.
For the social studies.
And they said in there, we will use the schools, which is what we're talking about today, testing. Carnegie funded the national assessment that we're talking about today. They funded the school to work agenda that we're talking about today, limited learning for lifelong labor. They signed the agreements with the Soviet Academy of Science to develop computer courseware in critical thinking for early elementary school children. At the same time, Ronald Reagan signed the agreement with the Soviet Gorbachev to merge the two systems. Now, if this isn't a lot of communism, I don't know what is. Okay, here's the quote. We will use the schools to change America's capitalist economic system to a planned economy, end quote. And in certain instances, we will take your land. All right, now Carnegie at this moment, I don't know what they did today, but I'll tell you, I think possibly I don't know of any entity that Carnegie is not in charge of, except maybe the production of dog food. Look, don't think I'm kidding. They're in charge of the UN, HIS, Alger HIS, the world, the United Nations, #1, Soviet agent, who drafted the UN Charter, Communist Pesvalsky. We have been under this for so many years, and because we were told in 90, that the whole thing was dead, communism is dead, we bought into.
Can you make the connection between Bill Gates and Carnegie? Is there?
Oh yeah, definitely. Bill Gates, yes, definitely. There have been grants. I don't know why Carnegie needs money, but I think Gates has given money.
Well, Gates actually has said, and you can find this quote pretty readily, I think. He said that what he did was he studied the philanthropy of Carnegie and Rockefeller to design his system of philanthropy.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, ma'am.
At the meeting Monday night, there was a man that stood up, he's in education in Fraser, and said that they had several good high-ranking schools, and it was, I don't remember the exact details of it, but he said that kids from the bottom, that aren't very good were brought into the school so that they could bring the average of the school down and then make it a charter school.
That's right.
This is my comment. Does any of this have anything to do with all of these illegals that are coming into the country right now and going to our school systems?
Well, it possibly could, but you had the system set up already. So, the bottom 5% in your state, we're looking at your laws, the bottom 5% performers on a test that they won't let you see automatically are eligible to be put into your ASD. We have Recovery School District. You have Achievement School, ASD, Achievement School District. But they're trying to bring the communities to consensus in some cases, and that's what that meeting is that gentleman was speaking about, Charles, because so many schools each year will be put into the ASD off that list, and the rest will be matched to a charter school. Now, either way, they're getting chartered. The ASD is just getting them, holding them, running them until they can get a charter to take them, okay?
They're charged with taking them over.
And then the ones that opt for the matching, they allow the community to have these meetings to help choose and get to know their charter authorizer or manager, okay? So once the schools are chartered, as Charlotte keeps explaining to everybody, that means that governance is given over to the unelected board of the company that is chartered. So the parents then are being sold, we're all being sold on school choice, but once that happens, you have no choice and no voice. And that's what those people are experiencing and understanding, and that's why Charles was here. So what happens with the kids who are getting bussed out is the charter schools don't have to take every student, even though they're public. So that's got to be against the state constitution, I'm just saying. But they don't have to take all the students. And so the lower performing students, for different reasons, they're making up reasons. One time it was just the oldest kids. We saw different reasons, but bottom line is it's the lowest performing students are getting bused to another traditional public school. Well, when you do that, they wind up in the bottom 5%. Now, I'm going to ask you this, because this occurred to us when we were reading this, that at some point you're going to have a list of the lowest 5% performing schools, but they're all performing well because you've gotten rid of all the ones that scored poorly. But you still have this 5% thing that's got to happen. So eventually what your system has done is set you up to have all charter schools, eventually. Mm-hmm. Now, they did that 5% thing with our teachers. Every year, the lowest performing on their compass evals.
10%, huh? Or is it 5?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I thought it was 5, but we have a percentage, and yeah, I think it is the 10. 10% of our lowest performing teachers get the boot.
Regardless.
Now, at some point, we got to believe we're going to be down to just really, really good teachers, right? And does it matter? No. We're going to get TFA to take their place, Teach for America. And then that's all we're going to have is Teach for America, which those kids are out of college, 2 years. They devote to Teach for America. And they're bright, good kids. They don't know anything else. They get 6 weeks of training to indoctrinate and facilitate our children in becoming indoctrinated, and that's all we're going to have at that point.
And what it looks like when it's done is it takes some of the parents in New Orleans up to 3 weeks to register their child for school because they're on waiting lists, waiting to be accepted into the charter school. Now, wait a minute. We were told this was school choice, right? Who has the choice? The schools. So maybe it is school choice. They get to choose, not the parents. And they have children that are accepted in one school, but a child accepted in another school. 3 different schools maybe that now they have to go to when all of their children could be or should be in the same school. They now have to go to 3 different schools. Students that are not accepted in the neighborhood school, so their child is being bused now to another school. So we have a child that we were told about that gets on a bus at 5 a.m. and doesn't get home until 7 p.m. every day. That's that child's school day. And that's a little much. But, hey, they were given a choice, right?
Also, Orleans Parish, we have parishes. Orleans Parish is the first all-chartered district in the country. And it's the model for the nation, and Charlotte speaks about this often. Well, the reality, this fall was the first time it was all chartered. The reality for the children in that parish now is that they have to attempt to get accepted into a charter school. If they're not accepted in the charter school, they have to hope that they can get a voucher to one of the private schools. Well, there aren't voucher slots for every kid. Even if there were, guess what? The unelected board of that private school doesn't have to take them either. So in Orleans Parish this year, there are children who have yet to go to school because their parents who were raised in this system also and are waiting for the government to tell them what to do, are waiting for the government to tell them when their kid can go to school. These kids are home. They're on the rolls of schools that accept vouchers, who are willing to take them, but they're not going to take them without the voucher funding. Yep. So these poor children have not been to school. That's the reality of unelected boards that we are paying for. We have no voice in, we have no choice in. And the children are being left behind, and it doesn't matter because they're going to fit them into some part of the workforce eventually. Now we're going to open it up to questions, but I just wanted to leave you with this because in Tennessee,
Still want to see those two.
yeah, we're going to, oh, you want to show the videos first?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to show you these 2, right?
We just have 3.
You
No,
want
3
to show the
more.
workforce?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to show you these last 3 videos real quick. This is, one of them is an elected official, and we just wanted to, in talking about you know, how can this happen, and this is just a few of the words of some of our elected officials.
He's our leading conservative official, by the way. Keep that in mind as you listen.
The good of the few must always be subject to the good of the whole. In other words, majority rules. In particular, we've become overly fixated upon what is good for the individual, or perhaps on a subset of individuals, instead of what is important for the whole of society.
People you put on him.
Exactly.
Okay, don't give it another label.
And he led the Senate charge for the school choice package that our governor put through. This is our superintendent again.
We have standards and diplomas and tests and all these things we've been discussing for a reason. I think we probably would all agree that sometimes things would be easier without them, but we have them for a reason, and the reason is the assurance of civil rights and justice. That's the reason we have these things. We put standards in place to assure the citizenry and the children and the families that we are demonstrably able to achieve a basic minimum education. And we did that because on some level, we all know we can't just leave it up to the subjective whims of individuals, myself included. We must have a shared understanding. So anytime you take the decision away from the collective and you put it in the hands of an individual, you do so at the risk, not at the assurance, but at the risk of the violation of civil rights and justice.
I think we evidently were pushing the right buttons with those bills because we flushed them out pretty well. Last one is Karen in the Workforce Commission. And we just wanted to show you this to show you how we're treated and how it's important to not let them get away with it.
Yes, I'm Karen Champagne. I'm with the People LLC. And I want to thank you all for indulging us. We're extremely concerned about the data sharing agreement that was signed between the Department of Education and the Louisiana Workforce Commission. We're here to ask questions. I understand that maybe some of you all aren't as concerned as we are, but this is our children's information. We want to know why they're sharing the information.
You're here to testify about the Sunset Bill and discuss those issues relative to
Which
that.
is
But you
within
can't ask
the
us.
Louisiana Workforce
But
Commission.
we're the only ones that can ask questions. That's the protocol.
Well, can we ask you all to ask them for us?
Yes. You can certainly state your questions, and certainly any material or data or statistical data that you have, we would like to get copies of that so that we can follow up on that, whatever concerns that you do have.
These are concerns that just regular citizens have, and are we welcome at the table?
No, we want that information.
Okay.
Don't misunderstand me. We welcome you here. We want the information. It's just that there's a protocol here that we get to ask the questions.
That's fine. I'm not asking you for answers. I'm hoping y'all can get them for us.
We will get you the answers, for sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
I know that the gentleman that was speaking here earlier from the Workforce Commission had said that the data system is no longer in use, but he also said that it was because they had found other systems that could provide the information that they needed. As a citizen, after reading the request for proposal for that SAS system, I would like to know what information that they are still gathering. Are they still gathering the comprehensive person profiles? And who are those person profiles being compiled on?
Do you have a list of your questions that you can have copied for the committee? Or would you like to email them to us?
Yes, I can do that as well. But I'd also like to state it for the record, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Because this is extremely concerning, and it should be to all citizens whenever a government is compiling data on its citizens. I don't know if you all would agree with that, but I find it very concerning, especially when it states that they're going to be using this between agencies. It's authorizing accessing data from other agencies. So how many agencies are accessing data, and exactly what are they compiling on citizens is what we're concerned about. The comprehensive person profile says that it's creating a dossier for each person, and it doesn't define which persons. So is that every citizen of the state? I know you can't answer, but I would like an answer. It also says that it has a targeting scheme. They're using factor weights and filters to determine specific areas of populations to be targeted. Are we targeting specific populations just for fraud or for other things? All employees and employers, is that every employee and employer of the state will be periodically evaluated for trigger events. A comprehensive profile will be available for review by state of Louisiana staff, and it doesn't say which staff. So is this just this database? Since we found other databases that will do this, which agencies do these databases exist in? Since we have data sharing agreements with the Department of Education, is there a comprehensive profile on my child? And what is he being profiled for? For labor? Since we're creating a workforce, and that's the purpose of our schools now, since we've changed from educating our children at our schools to now developing a workforce for a planned economy. Is my child being profiled for a job that will be predetermined for him? As a parent, I want to know. I want to know what y'all are doing with our data, why it's okay for department heads to sign data sharing agreements, why parents weren't notified, why these systems still exist, if they exist, and what the purpose of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I can...
We're going to open up to questions. Just 1 second. The last thing before we open officially for questions is we've been researching while we've been here, in between some other stuff, about what's going on in your state to try to see what things we could hone in on to kind of help you. We've tried to communicate some of those, but the last thing is we found a blog from somebody who leads your anti-Common Core movement here. And the most recent blog post made a very interesting, alarming statement to us. But it's so helpful in explaining why school choice needs to be the target and not the Common Core. Let me give you this first. The testing, the standards, the data collection, the high stakes accountability, all of that is being taught to everyone as being part of the Common Core initiative. That's a label given so that you never go to your legislator and say school choice, charters, vouchers. But all of those things, as you can see, I think from our presentation tonight, are what defines school choice. Charters and vouchers don't exist without those things. And the charters and vouchers depend on those so that the schools can exist to create a workforce, whether our kids want it or not, whether those jobs are what they choose in life or not, and it's being predetermined for them. So that's why school choice has to be the target. Now, what was on this blog is very helpful to illustrate this, because what the person stated was that you have to fight Common Core first, because Common Core is the smoke and school choice is the fire. So you first have to clear the smoke and then you can put out the fire. Does that make sense to anyone? Yes. If the fire is burning, will you ever clear the smoke? No. In order to get rid of the smoke, you have to extinguish the fire, or else all you'll be doing is fanning into the wind while Rome burns. That's why school choice has to be. And this person actually doesn't realize it, but she agrees with us, because she's illustrating the point that you have to attack the fire first. And as she says, the fire is school choice. If you attack school choice, you live to fight another day, because then you hang on to your elected school board members, your representative form of government, which you can hire and fire. We haven't been very good at that. But now that we're awake, we can be, and we need to be. So in order to have that opportunity, and for our kids to have that opportunity, we must hang on to our elected boards. And if we stand there fanning smoke while the fire's burning and creating more smoke, our kids lose, and our country loses. So we'll open it up for questions. Now, thank you all so much for being such a good audience.